Welcome into another big game breakdown. As today, I'm going to be previewing the UConn Huskies, the number one team in the land, traveling to Creighton to take on the Blue Jays. They come in number 15 in the land. Before I break down this game, make sure to subscribe to our channel, like this video, comment, follow us on social media. We've got a full sports podcast where we break down everything in the sports world every week. We got a new episode coming out today. So please check that out. I've got more gambling videos coming for you guys soon. And today, let's get right into this breakdown as we're looking at the top game on the slate tonight, right? UConn comes in 24-2. They're 14-1 in the conference, whereas Creighton comes in number 15, 19-7, 10-5. They're third in the Big East. Nobody's catching UConn in the regular season. The Huskies, in a couple games regardless, will close out the regular season title. Obviously, they're the defending national champions. Their only two losses this year have come in true road games. They lost at Allen Fieldhouse to Kansas early in the year, a game where they trailed by 2 on the final possession, had a shot that could have won the game for them in the final few seconds after a foul. They ended up dropping that one 69-65. Their other loss came at Seton Hall in their first Big East matchup, a game where they lost their starting center, Donovan Clingan, early in that game. Lost that one 75-60. Those are the only two losses, and it's been a tremendous season for UConn. This isn't surprising to me or probably to anyone. This is a team that won the national title last year. Yes, they lost a few key guys, but a lot of guys returned. They obviously got Cam Spencer, Stephon Castle as well. So really solid team. I think they are the best team in the country. Oddly enough, UConn's only 4th in the net ranking, and they're 2nd in KenPom. Although they're a unanimous number 1 in the AP poll. And I actually do agree with that in terms of the AP poll. They are by far the best team in the country on the eye test. Now, whether the Big East has something to do with that, I don't know. But UConn is a pretty darn good basketball team. But so is Creighton. Creighton's 13th in the net and the KenPom. And this is one of the better games that better teams UConn's had to face on the road this season. And the Huskies have been dominating teams, right? After losing their Big East opener against Seton Hall, they've rattled off 14 straight victories. I heard on a podcast today that if the Huskies are able to win this game tonight, it would be the first time in the history of college basketball that any team has won 15 consecutive Big East Conference games, which is crazy. Obviously, the Big East is not what it once was. Still a power conference with some solid teams atop the conference. Top to bottom might be a little bit down this year, but still would be wild if UConn got their 15th consecutive win. Oddly enough, I think they're going to lose tonight. So let's get into why. So let's look at UConn's recent run of games. So we'll talk about the Marquette game in a second. So that was their most recent outing. Obviously, that was domination of a really good team. But before that, the previous 7 games, they beat DePaul, Georgetown, Butler, St. John's, Providence, Xavier, and Nova. Those teams have an average KenPom rating of 104. That is a little bit skewed because DePaul is 308 and Georgetown's 154. So those two skewed a little bit. But even if you look deeper in, right, only 3 of those 7 teams are in the top 50 in the KenPom. Only 1 is in the top 40, and that is Villanova at 31, not a single one in the top 30. So they have not played a lot of really good teams recently. Now, and tonight they're playing Creighton, who is 13th, as I mentioned, in the net and the KenPom. Now, all that said, they played number 4 Marquette on Saturday at home, and it was absolute domination, right? They beat the living shit out of Marquette, couldn't have played any better, in my opinion. They led by 16 at halftime, came out in the second half, and shot almost 60% from downtown. I mean, everything that could go right did. So, number 1, this is going to be a sell high spot on UConn because, we'll get into the market in a second, but this number seems a touch off. You also look at the spot for UConn, right? Not only the emotion and the get up of playing a team like Marquette, right? That's like the battle for supremacy in the Big East, to show you're the big guy, you're the boss, you're the number 1 team, which they are. And to dominate Marquette like that, now having to go on the road to a good team. When you've had, in the past 5 years, when you've had teams who are in the top 10 and they beat another top 10 team by 15 or more points. Their next game, they then go on the road and play a ranked opponent. It's happened 11 times. Those teams that, like UConn, are 4-7 in that spot straight up. The 4 wins, average margin of victory, 3.8 points. Just in the wins, not including the losses, right? So they, in the games that they actually do win, they're only winning by an average of less than 4 points. We're catching 3 here, right? So spot not great for UConn. Really, really much better for Creighton, who is a very good home team. And then you look at UConn on the road this season, right? Obviously, their 2 losses this season came on the road in true road environments. At Seton Hall, yes, they lost Klingon, but they lost by 15, right? To a Seton Hall team that's, they're 4th in the Big East. They're not bad. Not a bad team, but at the time, they were not playing very good basketball. It was a huge upset at the time. And then you look at the rest of their road wins, I guess. Kansas, I exclude because everybody loses at Allen Fieldhouse, but they won at Butler by 7, right? They won at Xavier by 5. They won at Villanova by 1 and at St. John's by 13. So, again, none of those teams in the top 30 of the KenPom or the net rankings, right? The best team that in that group is Villanova, and they are 31st in the KenPom, and they're 35th in the net ranking. In that game, Villanova got down 11-0. And so dug themselves a huge hole, couldn't buy a bucket early in that game. And despite that, fought back, actually tied the game in the first half. And the game came down to the final few possessions. UConn was able to pull it out. They made free throws late. They won by 1. There was a half-court shot at the buzzer. It really was a 4-point victory. But regardless, it was a very, very tight game. And the number there was 4.5. UConn was a 4.5-point favorite. So Nova was going to cover that number regardless of whether the half-court shot went in or not. But again, the other 2 games they played on the road in conference, DePaul and Georgetown, I'm just not even going to look at those. They're irrelevant. So, again, you look at that, and you look at the fact that now they're playing the 13th best team in the country. And I'm not saying just, blindly back the team, but if the matchup works, the spot is great. And I think there's this perception now in the market that you're going to have to pay a premium to take UConn now, right? And we don't see that a ton in college basketball, right? We see a lot of teams who are favored on their home floor when they are unranked or a lower rank facing a really good team. That's not the case here, right? We're catching 3 points. And we don't see Creighton as a home dog very often. Haven't seen it yet this season. You look at the market, right? I mean, in this, UConn on the road this year at Nova, they laid 4.5 in that game. We talked about that. Just 4 weeks ago, though, they laid 2.5 at St. John's. So this is the same number, really. They're laying less, against a St. John's team that's 14-12 and outside the top 40 in the net and KenPom. So, I think we're getting some value here. I mean, the first time these 2 teams played, UConn only was favored by 6 at home, and usually there's a bigger than a 3-point swing in these venues. So then let's look at the matchup. The first matchup these guys played this season, UConn came away with a 62-48 victory. But in that matchup, UConn shot the ball horrifically. Creighton played really good defense. They held UConn to 36% from the field, 26% from downtown. This is a UConn team that is the number 2 team in the country in effective field goal percentage. They shoot it at 57.5% effective field goal percentage, 60% from 2, and just under 37% from 3. So what Creighton did defensively worked. Creighton just didn't shoot the ball well. And essentially what the game came down to is offensive rebounds. And this is a game where UConn out-rebounded them on the offensive glass 20-6. In fact, UConn, because of that, shot the ball 18 more times than Creighton. And it's not like Creighton shot a bunch of free throws. UConn shot more free throws than Creighton in the game. UConn shot 10, Creighton shot 7. So UConn had 18 more attempts at the basket. In fact, when you think about it that way, UConn, as the number 1 team in the country at home, and you get 18 more shots than your opponent, you really should win the game by 20, 25 points. I mean, that is ridiculous to get that many more shots than your opponent. So the question then is that repeatable, right? Is this like an area of concern for Creighton? And the answer is no. So UConn is an elite offensive rebounding team, right? They're 12th in the country in offensive rebound percentage. However, Creighton is 20th in the country in allowing offensive rebounds. So it's not a distinct advantage in terms of season-long numbers. It was a one-game sample where on the road for Creighton, they got dominated on the glass. They have Kalkbrenner inside, a 7-footer, right? Normally a pretty solid defensive rebounding team, right? They're a good defense. They don't foul, and they get defensive rebounds. They're not going to give you cheap points. They're not going to give you free possessions. This game was an anomaly where they got out-rebounded by 14 on the offensive glass. Now, if that happens tonight, they're going to lose the game. I just don't think it's repeatable, right? Let's look at the season-long numbers, right? And the season-long numbers tell us Creighton is a good defensive rebounding team. So we're not going to overreact to one game. In fact, we're going to play the opposite way, right? So obviously, I've already said it. We're going to take the Blue Jays here. Last thing I'll say in favor of Creighton, they're the 8th most experienced team in the country, right? And to me, I believe experience in these spots matters a lot. UConn, not inexperienced, right? They've got guys who've won a national title. But in terms of D1 minutes, right? They're like 71st, and Creighton's 8th. Creighton has a lot of dudes who played a ton of minutes. They're playing in a really comfortable environment where they have a lot of success. Creighton has lost 2 times at home this season in conference, 2 times the whole year. Those 2 losses came by a combined 3 points, right? So all the numbers kind of suggest, like, look, we have to take Creighton in this spot, but I actually like the matchup. Does it mean it's a lock? Absolutely not. Nothing's ever a lock in this business, in this game. But I think if you bet Creighton in this spot 100 times, you're going to win 60 to 65% of them. So I like the Blue Jays. Give me Creighton plus the 3. Again, one more time, make sure to check out my website. I have an extra best bet on there. I was trying to do a video, but I had issues with my microphone, so I'm not sure if I'm going to get the second best bet up here on YouTube, but it will be on my website, www.dillonleaguesports.com. Hit the link in the description or type it in on your web browser. Make sure to subscribe to our channel, like, comment, all those good things. Tell me who you got tonight on the games. Enjoy a great slate of college basketball on Tuesday night, and I will see you guys next time for another big game breakdown.